Dearly beloved masters, in a world filled with chaos, you have the physical, the mental, and the emotional elements that are now being blended by spirit. And in the mental realms, you have logic, practicality, science, and then you have nature, which is a blending of physical and spiritual, the natural world. Logic and practicality will put up quite a fight to deny that anything that is not something you can taste, you can see, you can hear, you can smell, you can touch, if anything beyond that exists, it's doubtful. And the physical, egoic, left-brained, logical mind wants proof. And it is proof, as we say quite frequently, is not something that really proves anything. Because if you gather a group of very logical, practical people together, people of a left-brained persuasion, people of a scientific mind that always demands proof, then they are going to be in great approval of things that you can set before them. If you can give them a logical explanation. And yet, in the natural world, even though science has done a lot to go into nature and prove how things function, there is the communication between animals. Not only that all wolves or all lions or all bears communicate with their kind, but that the animals communicate among the different types. So, on the planet now, the logical, the practical, are clinging very tightly to what they can see and what they believe. And they don't have any desire to examine anything that they can't control. In fact, the idea, even though so many people avow that they believe in God, for a lot of them, something they probably would never speak out loud to anyone, the idea of God in their life is a bit disturbing. That this all-knowing, all-seeing, all-aware Creator would be involved in their affairs. And it's disturbing. No one really wants their parent to know everything they're doing with their life. And certainly not to have a deity to be perusing the thoughts, the emotions, the actions and activities of life. And yet, that is exactly what is happening now. The natural world, nature, has been set aside, dismissed, relegated to a much lesser point of value than it had in the beginning of creation. And in the physical, mental, and emotional world, spirit is moving in to be involved, not to take over, but to augment, to uplift, to enlighten, to expand, so that humanity can truly begin to appreciate within themselves a vast amount of the world that they have simply denied. Logic and practicality resists, and science argues about whether it's so or not. And yet nature functions as nature does, and it naturally moves in the cycles that were designed in the beginning of creation. There has been, in the logical, practical, mental world, a lot of thought processes about how to change the cycles of nature, how to move things in a way that is much more acceptable to a rational mind. Because, after all, the natural and the supernatural are not rational. And logic and practicality would even go so far as to say intuition, the listening within self to divine guidance, is an act of insanity. That you follow the guidelines of logic and you don't ask questions. You don't change, you don't do things differently. You just keep functioning as you always have. Except that now in these times on the planet, the laws of nature that were set into place in the very beginning are beginning to move forward to become much more obviously, consciously noticeable. And in the physical world, spirit is blending. And as you allow yourself, not try to make something happen or try to stop it from happening, but as you allow spirit to reveal more and more of who you are at a conscious level, And once you get past the fear of something you can't control, and the logical mind always supposes that if I can't control it, it's evil. It's a bad thing. And yet, as Spirit reveals to you consciously how that connection within yourself feels, that awareness of you within yourself. It isn't someone else taking you over. It isn't mind control. It is a deep remembering, a resonant frequency in the center of your being, in the core. It is a totality, almost as a chime is struck within you. And even though you don't hear it with your physical ears, you feel it resonating in your center, an energy going out in all directions that awakens, enlivens. It brings a tingle. Sometimes it brings a chill up the spine. Not because it's warning you of something terrible to come, but it's connecting senses within you that have been closed down in the illusion, and that super sensory connectivity allows you to experience who you are within yourself. That isn't about how the world perceives you. It is about who you are discovering you are within. And those of a logical, practical mindset will seek to dismiss, to justify, to find an explanation, or two, or three, or four, of why it's just coincidental. Except that for many, even some of the most logical and practical, these internal shifts are becoming more frequent, more powerful, and more obvious. And it comes to a point where even the most logical cannot really deny that there is something greater that is occurring that they have not experienced in memory. And what they feel when they allow themselves to acknowledge it, it feels good. It feels strong, safe. It feels connected. It feels sweet. And the ego mind says, don't believe it. Because how do you know what is causing that good feeling? And the programming of logic and practicality, and even of the scientific mind, has been, if you cannot control it, if you cannot say where it came from, even if it feels wonderful, doubt it, question it, and potentially, dearly beloved masters, fear it. Too good to be true. It is a hallmark of logic and practicality. It's too good to be true. If it's too good, don't trust it. Now, to feel within yourself when someone calls you on the telephone and tells you that you have just won $250,000 and all you have to do is send them $150 to guarantee the safe sending of your $250,000 to your bank account. And even though the idea of having $250,000 is quite enticing, when you feel into your center, it doesn't feel that good. It's as though there are alarms going off. It creates tension, it creates questions, it activates your internal protection, your early warning system. Care for yourself. And, dearly beloved masters, to forgive being afraid, not to say yes. So, understanding feels very different than rationalization. The mind presents you with knowledge. The knowledge that someone's on the phone and they're saying that you have potentially won $250,000. And there are those that want it to be so badly that they don't pay any attention whatsoever to the fact that their solar plexus is tied in a knot. That there is a feeling in their center that doesn't feel that joyous. Confusion. And dearly beloved masters, if you don't trust anything else, understand that when there is confusion, it is the ego mind. Whenever there is confusion, I just don't know, I can't make a choice. I don't know whether to say yes or no. Is it good or bad, right or wrong? That is an assurance that the ego is attempting to lure you into something that isn't trustworthy. To come home to yourself, to connect, to allow spirit to blend with the physical affairs begins to give you a deeper connection with self, a greater realization of who you are, a more powerful internal awareness that there is so much more to you than you have been told, than you have been allowed to know, and for lifetimes. People who were intuitive very often were considered both intriguing and terrifying. And it isn't because it was really bad as much as it is that so many people have shut down their natural flow of connection to the God force, to spirit, to the goodness of life, to truth within themselves. And they have been told to have faith in something most often outside of themselves. And yet in the Bible it says, faith is the evidence of things unseen. It has a resonance that is so clear, so calm, so peaceful, and so direct if you will listen. Not listen with your ears, but hear, feel. Feel that resonance. Things are really all right. This is going to be well. And as you began to move away from the logical, practical, illusionary reality that the mind has offered for so long, and you began to discover within yourself the reality of you as a spiritual being, how strong it feels, how clear, and yes, it requires recognizing the fear that the ego mind sends you, attempting to prevent you from living in conscious alignment, conscious awareness with that internal sweetness. And life brings challenges. So in the illusion, the promises of religion have been that if you're a good person, then you will have a good life. So what is your definition of a good life. The ego-mind definition of a good life is getting to do exactly what I want when I want to, and having all the money I want to do whatever I want whenever I want. That isn't sweet. It's like a drug. It is so elusive because humanity was designed to be active, to participate in living. With the mind, with the body, with the feeling nature. Emotions are reactive, and more often than not lead to some level of strife, conflict, or outright war. But that internal sweetness provides you with a life that stimulates you, that gives you something to look forward to, that allows you, and it isn't as though you have to have someone else's permission, but a life that opens the way within you for your own personal allowing of a life that feeds your soul. Logic and practicality, more often than not, will stop you just as you're reaching for the thing that you have desired the most, that you are about to approach the dream. And logic says, who do you think you are? What on earth makes you believe that you deserve to have something that good? And lifetimes in the illusion, lifetimes of programming. Will resound not in your center, but in the mind. Doubt, resistance, fear, that stop you and make you begin to question, do I really have a right to this much good? And the answer that Revelation is bringing, dearly beloved masters, is absolutely. You have a right to the good, your good, that resonates within you. And the more that you allow yourself to trust the internal knowing, which is so much more powerful than logic, that is so much more flexible than practicality, the internal realms resonate with freedom. But the internal realms also clarify what logic says is free isn't. And so the mind looks for ways to be able to justify doing whatever it wants to, and have no retribution. That there will be no karma. I can do whatever I want. I can take whatever I wish. I can push others aside. I can deny what I feel within myself. That if I would listen, it would lead me into places of vast new wonder. And the logical, practical mind is very much like a dull gray veil that blocks the brilliance and the beauty. One of the first things that people began to notice as they allowed themselves to break through the logical practical is everything is brighter. And we make references to the Bible, and yes, you can prove most anything you wish with the Master Book, and yet it is just filled with references that when they are attended to internally rather than logically broken down, torn apart, analyzed, and then reaching an answer that I want put forth to the world. This is what this means. But truly, in the logic and practicality, you see through a glass darkly, as though the windows haven't been washed in a long time. And as you feel within yourself, enlightenment begins to clear the window, the grime of illusion, and you begin to see things more sharply, more clearly, more well-defined. You may look on a scene that you've looked on many, many times before, and suddenly it is as though someone has put a new lens on your vision. And it isn't only with the physical eyes, but almost as though you feel a new clarity, a sharper definition of your life in your solar plexus. Seeing without eyes, hearing without ears. So much more well-defined, with clarity, with acuity, with color, beauty, because logic and practicality tend to maintain limitations. They stop you when you are just about to take that next step into a place that you haven't been before.